Towards the end of World War II, as the Allied armies pushed into Germany on their way to Berlin to force the Nazi Germany regime to surrender, the German army developed a new tactic. They were taking down road signs and flipping them upside down. They were replacing landmarks. They were tearing stuff down and moving roads. Anything that they possibly could do to slow down the opposing armies. And to an extent, it worked out fairly well. You had members of the military in long lost locations far from where they were supposed to be. It caused a great deal of confusion, but ultimately, it didn't work. But that is a very interesting thing. If we don't have a road sign, oftentimes we don't get to where we're going, particularly if we don't know the way. Right? That is the reality of it. You know, before cell phones, we used to get these maps out, right? And you know what's so great about maps? Is that the ones from 1950s don't work today. Okay? My dad, my parents, they collected maps, literally. I don't think they threw any of them away, right? I mean, they were there. And so they would then tell you, okay, here's a map to where you're going. You get it and you look at it and you start going your route and you realize, this route doesn't go there anymore. Or there's another route. This one looks like an expressway has been put in. And you get lost easily if you don't know your map. Right? You do. And those signs were the only way that you could actually tell if you were going someplace where you were supposed to. If your map's not good, the signs are the only thing you can go by. Folks, that same is true with our Christian faith. If our understanding of what is laid before us according to God's word is not there, then those road signs that we rely on by habit can be turned around and spun any direction. We've been dealing with false teachers in the book of Jude. And one of the interesting things about these false teachers is they're not blatantly false. In the sense of, they don't come in and offer you a direct alternative, like instead of left, we're going to go right. No, they say instead of going left a little bit, we're going to go left halfway. Right? Anybody knows math knows that a little inch at the base of the problem is only an inch. But you go 12 feet up and you're going an inch off, suddenly that's a big, big, big difference. At first it seems small, but later on it gets big. And the question that many people have is, how do we find these false teachers if they're so sneaky? What are those road signs that we can look for, assuming that we can find them? And the challenge before us, of course, is always to keep our map up to date and ready. This morning we're going to talk a little bit based on Jude. I think Jude actually gives us a little bit of a, if you will, a glimpse into these road signs, if you will, that we can actually take to identify these false teachers. It's Jude 8 through 11, only one chapter in the book of Jude, and it reads pretty simple. It says, "In the very same way, these dreamers pollute their own bodies, they reject authority, and they slander celestial beings. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare bring a slanderous accusation against him, but said, 'The Lord rebuke you.' Yet these men speak abusively against whatever they do not understand. And what things they do understand by instinct, like unreasoning animals, these are the very things that destroy them. Woe to them. They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for profit to Balaam's error. They have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion." There's three things here that we can, if you will, three road signs that are almost always present in a false teacher. Almost always present. And Jude says in verse 8 right there, they pollute their own bodies. How many times do we look at that text and we go, I don't know what that means? Well, other translations say things differently. Some will actually say they defile the flesh. This has a distinctive sexual misconduct kind of image around it. It's not just that they are doing something that's bad, like, injecting themselves with heroin or something. No, this is the fact that they're going after sexual sin. False teachers, one of the flags is a sexual sin in their life. They defile their body. Paul says elsewhere that he who sins sexually sins against his own self. All right? We will find that. And I remember in the 80s, big news when certain people, Jim Bakker being one of them and others, right? They get out there and suddenly they're running away with the secretary, right? These church leaders are having affairs. They're doing stuff. That is a sign of a false teacher. Now, throw a little quotation mark here. Not every false teacher is going to be embroiled in sexual sin. And not every person who's embroiled in sexual sin is a false teacher. All right? Unfortunately for us, we all have weak links in our armor. And some people do struggle with sexual sin. It doesn't necessarily make what they say is wrong. It just means, fundamentally speaking, that this is a problem they deal with. Likewise, not every false teacher is going to struggle with this. They could be faithful to their wife the whole time. But this is a red flag. This is something that we can see, and it causes us to go, maybe we should pump the brakes on this guy, this lady, whoever, right? If they're teaching falsehood, it's up to us to determine, based on their own personal life and conduct, whether or not that's an accurate thing. All right? The first thing it says there, they pollute their own body, by definition. The second thing they do is they reject authority. This is this interesting one, because it happens a lot, whether we like it or not. There are many people in different governments that we talk about in this. It all fit under the same thing. It's authority. It's anyone placed over you. So, we talk about, let's go ahead and talk about the local, state, federal government. How many false teachers have been convicted of tax evasion? Not paying their taxes, saying they don't need to. How many of them have said what the government has said is wrong, therefore I'm going to oppose them? And they make that a point from their pulpit to say that. I am a true patriot, therefore I will not do this. These people, they reject authority. Now again, it goes back to the thing. Not everyone who sits there and says, I'm not going to obey the government and everything, is a false teacher. There are some people out there who feel very strongly. For example, a good case is the issue of abortion. There are some pastors out there that don't feel comfortable paying income tax because the federal government subsidizes abortions overseas. That's a principle they're willing to die on. It doesn't necessarily make everything else that they say wrong. But when you reject authority, it causes everyone else to go, well, let's examine you a little closer. Let's take a little closer step. Let's get that magnifying glass out and look at what you're saying and how you're living. It's a red flag. These people, they pollute their own bodies, they sin sexually, they reject authority. Did you know the authority they can also reject can be church authority? Many pastors actually sit under the realm and authority of a church board. Other denominations will have the church pastor sitting under bishops or other figureheads. And when these individuals reject authority in that particular sense, say the church board says, no, you can't do that event. The pastor goes ahead and does it. The question you have to ask yourself once again is this a good thing or not? It's not like saying if he does this, then he automatically is a false teacher. We're not saying that at all. What we're saying, though, is that when these issues arise, when he rejects authority, It's time to take the magnifying glass out and look at the person. What do they truly believe? What are they truly doing? Because guess what? In any situation, the boss can be wrong. Okay? The boss can be wrong. And it can be right for a person to do the right thing. And there are many examples throughout history in all levels of situations where that occurs. It doesn't necessarily make you a false teacher just because you tell your boss no. But it is grounds to start looking at the guy. Start grounds looking at that woman. Whoever is out there preaching, if they're not listening to the authority that's placed over them, whether it is the local, state, or federal, or the church authority, if they're saying no to something, it's time to get your magnifying glass out. It's time to do some exploration of this individual. It's time to question them. That's what they do. And the other one is very interesting that he says. The third thing he says, they slander celestial beings. This one's an interesting one for me because, what's fascinating is it doesn't say they curse them. It doesn't say they invoke them. It doesn't say they misuse them necessarily. No, this is where they slander them. Other translations will say they blaspheme these individuals. It's very interesting. I go down to work, and there's a fair number of individuals that'll actually tell me that Satan is responsible for all sin in their personal life. Right? That ultimately, all sin is because of Satan. And I guess there's a theological ground you can go on with that. But the problem I have with that is there's an awful lot of things I do in my own life that I do just because I want to do them. Maybe the temptation's there from Satan, but I'm the one that makes the willful choice. I'm the one that says, I'm going to go do that. So to me, it seems like I'm the one guilty of my own sin. Yet to lay the blame on a demon is problematic. Slandering celestial beings or blaspheming things you don't understand. They see something out there and they automatically jump to conclusions that it's the demons, or the case may be, the angels. Something bad happens, but actually puts a spin on it, some positive thing, and they say, oh, look, God meant it for good. Folks, I cannot tell this enough. When it comes to the supernatural, be very, very, very careful. The last thing we want to do is attribute something bad to God and something good to the devil. All right? Last thing we want to do. We don't want to slander the celestial beings. We don't want to put them in a situation. We can't really even begin to comprehend that side of the equation. So why do we talk like we do know? That's the question. So when people start slandering these celestial beings, when they start blaspheming these glories, when they start throwing around demons, and they start throwing around angels, and they start throwing down supernatural powers, and oh my, that's a red flag, folks. Now, I'm going to be quite honest with you. Not everyone, once again, who throws that out there is a false teacher. Some people have convictions. Like they got this gut feeling that this is the way it is. Some people have experiences that you cannot argue with. I have heard personal missionaries talk about animals speaking. Okay? These are born-again believers talking about animals that were talking to them in English. It's possible that there are demonic and angelic forces out at play in this world. It very much is. So just because someone gets up there and starts saying things is not necessarily a sign of evil. But it's a sign to grab your magnifying glass out and start looking at this. What does this individual say? How does this individual work it? These people, these false teachers, they slander celestial beings, they reject authority, and they pollute their own body. When you have a combination of all three of those, there's a good chance the individual you're talking about is someone you don't want to be following. Good chance of that. So what's going to happen to these individuals? How does Jude actually talk about that? You know, he says, look, these people do these things, these three things. Yet, in verse 9, he says, Michael the archangel, when he was disputing with the devil the debate about Moses' body, did not dare bring an abusive condemnation against him, but said, the Lord rebuke you. There's one example we can talk about, how it flips backwards on the slandering celestial beings. Even the archangel Michael didn't feel comfortable telling the devil to buzz off. All right, so why are we so confident in doing that when Michael wasn't? That's what Jude is basically saying there. These are what's happening. These people blaspheme anything they do not understand. And what they know by instinct, like unreasoned animals, they destroy themselves with these things. That's what we have right there. We're destroying themselves. It's very fascinating to me, the rise of things that happen, as an example here, when we talk about polluting your own body. We talk about the STDs around the world today. You pollute your own body when you engage in that. The chance is there. You're getting problems there. We find how they're rejecting authority generally leads to problems. Either the IRS comes knocking or your local bishop comes knocking. Either way, you've got problems. This is what they're saying. These people don't understand. The things that they understand, the order, the situation, whatever, it's the very same things that come back and bite them in the butt. These are the things that destroy themselves. Verse 11, he gives three examples in history. He says, woe to them, for they have traveled in the way of Cain. They have abandoned themselves to the error of Balaam for profit, and they have perished in Korah's rebellion. Three ones that we can line up real quickly. Phil, you remember Cain? He was the guy that wanted God's blessing and killed his brother to get it. Right? Cain murdered Abel. He polluted his own body with hatred, with envy, with strife. And what happened? Well, there's a curse that put on Cain, and he was left to wander to the days of Noah when he drowned in flood. Him and his descendants. The way of Cain polluted their own bodies. 1 John 3:12 says, Cain's works by definition were evil, and he did not act out of faith according to Hebrews 11 verse 4. That's what happened to these people. The works are evil and they're not believing them. That is what we have with a false teacher when they go the way of Cain. When they abandon themselves to the error of Balaam for profit. That's interesting. Remember Balaam? The Israelites were coming. The kings hired Balaam to go out there and pronounce a curse over all the Israelites. And he gets up there and his donkey starts talking to him. Remember that story? Yeah, angel of the Lord was going to kill him, but the donkey saved him, and then God allowed the donkey to talk. Balaam, he was doing it for money, and he was willing to invoke whatever curse he possibly could, demonic, angelic, whatever, on the Israelites. Not realizing what he was doing. He was doing it for money. They have done that. And Balaam slandered him, and he himself suffered because of that. The last one they talk about there is Korah's rebellion. Korah's rebellion occurred in the wanderings of Israel, and they were in the wilderness after they had left Egypt. And you might remember how God set the hierarchy of Israel leadership. Remember? Moses was in charge and he led them. Aaron was the priest and his sons were the helper. And then they had a few people from each tribe, kind of, if you will, elders of the tribe overseeing stuff. Well, somewhere along the line, this dude Korah decided he didn't like this. So he was going to upsert this and he was going to start his own. Korah perished in his rebellion. What does he say? Jude invokes that. He is saying, look, this is a rebellion against authority. Both the hierarchy of Aaron, in other words, the spiritual hierarchy, and Moses, as in the legal side. When Korah rebelled, he was throwing away everything that God had set out and saying, I know better. And he ends up perishing. According to Jude, all these people, they're going to have the problems. They've abandoned their ways to Cain. They have abandoned themselves to the error of Balaam, and they have perished in Korah's rebellion. These are historical things. What is the message that we can get out of this? Well, first of all is the false signs that we see on the road are the ones we can gauge a person by. And ultimately, we will see them in their doom. Ultimately, we will see them in their doom. So the question is, how do we know a real sign versus a bad one? Did you know that when D-Day happened, the paratroopers of 101st Airborne, particularly those of Easy Company, from which we are familiar with the Band of Brothers TV series and book, they were given a map. They were. When they jumped out of the plane, they were given a map of the direction below. Folks, we've been given a map. We have been given one that will transfer every situation that we have, everything in every problem, whether it be relational, whether it be theological, whether it be anything. We have been given a roadmap. It's God's word. The way we don't get lost, you got to read your map. You got to read your map. Your map's going to tell you how to get there. All we got to do is read it. Let's not be like these teachers. Follow them in their ways. Because if we don't, we run the risk. Well, we run the risk of doing the same thing they did. We will travel in the way of Cain. We will abandon ourselves to the error of Balaam. And ultimately, we will perish like they did in Korah's rebellion. Let's close with a word of prayer. Sovereign and